I would like to call this meeting to order. Thank you for joining our weekly hybrid MLS meeting. My name is Huey Jeff Huang with KW Executive, and I am your February program chair. To introduce our guest speaker today, we have Matt Roberts, is the Federal and Local Government Affairs Director. He serves as the CAR federal lobbyist for over 21 years, overseeing the association's effort to work with local GADs. Working with NAR, Matt helps ensure CAR housing issues are protected at the federal level. Matt graduated from Metropolitan State University of Denver. We also have today Jennifer Svec, is the Vice President of Public Policy and Advocacy. Jennifer has been with CAR for over 21 years, serving various roles. Starting her career as an intern for the association Political Affairs Department. She improved the Realtor Fund and campaign, and later served as a legislative analyst. Jennifer graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Government from the California State University, Sacramento. She also obtained a Master's of Science of Organizational Leadership from National University. So help me out. Let's welcome them with a warm applause. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, that was good. We can do better. Good morning, everyone. There we go. We got to be excited to wake up and talk about politics, right? I'm nice. I'm not the politician. I'm always nice. So again, my name is Matt Roberts. I am your lobbyist at the federal level for the California Association of Realtors. Been doing this for over 20 years. Started just a little after my colleague, Jennifer. And so being here with her is actually wonderful. Really appreciate this. It's a lot of fun.
It's fun to travel with you.
20 years. This is our first time doing an outreach together. So thank you. Thank you, Albert. We forgive West San Gabriel for stealing him from us.
Oh, do we?
So after 20 years, I've gotten to talk to a number of realtors. And one of the things that, let's see, there we go. One of the things that always comes up is, why do we do this after 20 years? Well, oftentimes something starts as a job. But if you stay someplace for over 20 years or a long time, you have to have a reason to why you're going to do this. And oftentimes you get to see people become homeowners. Isn't that wonderful? And it really is great. From the policy side, we get to work on legislation, regulation that makes it easier for people to become homeowners. They're able to afford their first home. They're able to just get their foot on the homeownership ladder. And unfortunately today, you're going to have to put up with a lot of TV quotes and movie quotes because I love TV. I love movies. And I was watching a TV show and this quote came up and it rang. At first it was funny, but then it kind of rang a little too true to California housing. And it was next stop home ownership. I'm only kidding. The middle class is dying. You'll be renting forever. It's kind of funny at first, but then you realize, well, that actually is kind of the California housing market. And unfortunately, you have to work with clients who are just making 10, 20, 30 offers to get that first home. And that, from a lobbyist standpoint, is what we take to the lawmakers to try to explain to them how difficult California's housing market is and why it's necessary to get bold when implementing proposals and legislation. For those of you wondering, this quote came from the TV show 30 Rock. So before I talk about policy, I just want to touch upon the Realtor Party. Okay, what is the Realtor Party? The Realtor Party is you. We're not Republicans. We're not Democrats. We support Realtor champions. And if you're wondering, well, we're just a bunch of small agents or brokers, what can we do compared to the Goldman Sachs of the world or Wall Street? I just want to tell you this story. How many people saw the movie The Big Short? It's a great movie, right? Remember the conference they went to in Vegas? So a few years after that, I did go to that conference. And one of the keynote speakers was a former Congressman, Barney Frank. And he walks out on stage as the keynote speaker, and he says, he's standing in front of 5,000 of these masters of the universe. He says, you guys are pretty powerful, but you're really not as strong as you think you are. Let me tell you who is really strong in Washington, D.C. And he says, the realtors. And he says that because there are realtors in every single congressional district. All 435 congressional districts have realtors. And when you vote and you respond to the call for actions and you invest, I am telling you, you are as powerful or more powerful than other interest groups in DC. But it really does start with you. When I walk into a member of Congress's office, they know that I'm representing 200,000 members in California, 1.5 million members nationwide, and thousands of members in their district. So it's really you that provide that voice when I go into an office. So please participate. When you see a call for action, get out there and respond. So when we look at DC, what does DC look like right now? As you can see, it is split, very close. There's 213 Democrats in the House of Representatives, 219 Republicans. There's 3 open seats. What does this mean? It means that the Republicans can only lose 2 votes. If a moderate Republican goes from a yes to a no, they're fine. If they lose 2, they're okay. If they lose 3 votes, now you're 216 to 216. And whatever they're trying to pass fails. It's a razor thin margin to try to pass legislation. Now there are 3 empty seats. 2 of them are solid Republican, including Kevin McCarthy's. Another is a solid Democrat. When those seats fill up, they'll have a 3-vote margin. In the Senate, you've got 51-49. Interesting, I believe last I heard, Vice President Kamala Harris now holds the record for the most tiebreaker votes in the history of the Senate. So it is, again, very difficult environment to pass legislation in. So what are they trying? Oh, okay. Sorry, you're stuck with another TV quote. So I was watching Saturday Night Live, and I saw this quote and it made me think, okay, this is Congress, because people ask, Matt, what are they doing in DC? Why aren't they passing legislation? Why aren't they trying to do something to help? What do they want? Well, what's it all for? What do the members of Congress want? Well, in a word, come on, chaos. That's what a number of members of Congress actually do want. They want to slam the brakes on the federal government. They think it's too big. They think it's not doing enough. For whatever reason, they are trying to stop Congress from passing legislation. And you see the chaos in the headlines. So what is the 118th session of Congress going to mean for the realtors? Big issues in Washington, D.C. right now are the budget. Just yesterday, a deal was announced to stave off a shutdown of the government. There were 3, all right, step back. There's 13 budgets for the US government, okay, appropriation bills. 3 of them were set to expire on March 1st. Yesterday, a deal was announced to not shut down, to extend those 3 budget programs, and actually I think a 4th. The rest of the government is supposed to shut down on March 8th. Looks like a deal is going to get done and there won't be a shutdown. However, until the ink is actually dry and the bill is signed, you never really know. I was talking to a colleague in DC yesterday and I'm like, hey, good news, right? We averted a shutdown. He's like, man, I've done this so long. it's popping Tums, and he's like, I don't know. I just don't know. So hopefully the budget deal has been done and that'll take care of that. Other things Congress is looking at is impeachment. They want it, the House of Representatives is looking to try to impeach President Biden. The committees that should be doing hearings on legislation and moving bills are doing hearings on the economy to try to get ready for the election. A lot of it is, what kind of headlines can I get for my district? And unfortunately, that's what we're dealing with in DC. Now, the good and bad news is you see housing crisis on there. Up until a couple of years ago, housing was not a national issue. But unfortunately, housing availability and affordability is now a national issue. It's bad because housing has gotten to that point. It's good because something usually has to reach a crisis level for Congress to act. And housing is now at that level. So there's interest, not just from California or New York or coastal states, but Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, everywhere is now feeling a housing pinch. And that makes it possible to perhaps get some housing legislation. So what are our issues? What are we, the realtors, asking for in DC this year? The first one is a bill called HR 5419. Now this deals with the Department of Labor's final rule that came out in January about employment or employee and independent contractor status. Now we've sent out some newsletters on this. Has anyone heard about the Department of Labor rule on independent contractor status? See a few heads nodding. The short of it is this. Jennifer Svec and the state lobbyists did an amazing job passing AB 5 at the state level. That guaranteed your ability to choose to be either independent contractors or employees. You have the choice, and the state statute protects that. The Department of Labor came out with a very broad, not industry specific, but broad final rule that now confuses the matter. It comes out with this multi-pronged test, essentially 6 questions or 6 tests that agents now have to ask, okay, am I falling under this category? Am I meeting this category? It's not a bright line. This industry can be independent contractors. This industry can't. And that confusion makes it difficult for brokers to run their business because obviously there are minimum requirements under state law. So what have we done? The National Association of Realtors, concerned that the Department of Labor rule could come out poorly, not in our favor, got HR 5419 introduced last September. If this passes, it's a fix. Real estate licensees will be able to still choose to be independent contractors or employees. And so our ask to Congress is to co-sponsor and pass HR 5419. If you want more information on this, CAR created a quick guide on the DOL rule. It's on our website. Our website's not the easiest to use. If you go to car.org, you'll see I highlighted the transaction center. You click on that. I see a few cameras out. I'll let you take a photo. You get a drop down. You go over to risk management. You get another drop down and you'll see legal tools right there. Click on legal tools, and the very first legal tool is what we put out, the quick guide from our legal department. Okay. So I'd highly recommend that you all go there. The next bill is HR 1321. This one's kind of my favorite. This bill would double the capital gains exclusion on the sale of a primary residence. Right. I think back, listen, my grandma bought her home 1978, lived there for 40 years and owned it until the day she died. 4,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms. She was a widower at the end. There was no reason for her to still be in that home. But capital gains. This is an opportunity to open up inventory, allow people to move and unlock existing inventory. This is a big bill. We're pushing very hard to get this passed. This is our top issue along with 5419. Next one is SALT. Is everyone else as depressed as I am after doing your taxes this year? We're trying to get the SALT cap raised. The great news is we have broad bipartisan support on increasing the SALT cap. Bad news is we just can't get it across the finish line yet, but this is a top issue for us. Another one is commercial to residential and trying to create tax credits so that commercial landlords and property owners can more easily convert unused and underutilized commercial space to residential. Now, 2025, sorry, I'm running time. I apologize, Svec. 2025, does anybody know this movie? Margin Call, great movie. I highly recommend you go see it. This is it. I'm telling you, this is it. Why? 2017 tax cuts, every individual part of the tax code that was amended in 2017, standard deduction, MID, SALT, it all expires at the end of 2025. Congress will have to go into the tax code and do something, because if the standard deduction gets cut in half, their constituents see a tax increase. They're not going to allow that to happen. 2025 is when a tax bill will get introduced, and hopefully we can start to get our priorities on there. Now, real quick, I like to try and guess the future. I want to know, when you think about the House of Representatives in the 2024 election, will it go to the Democrats? Will it go to the Senate? Because I love to know what our members are thinking. Who thinks for the House of Representatives that Democrats will take over the House of Representatives? Just raise your hand. Okay. Who thinks the Republicans maintain control of the House of Representatives? Okay. In the Senate, does the Senate stay in control of the Democrats? How many of you think the Republicans flip it? And finally, Trump or Biden? Just raise your hands. It's okay. It's not a party. Does Biden go a second term? No. Does Trump come back in? I'm now going to tell you what's actually going to happen, so you can invite me back and tell me how wrong I was next year. The House does flip to the Democrats. The Senate does flip to the Republicans. And honestly, other than Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona, there's really no other reason for any state to have a presidential election. But at the end of the day, yes, Biden will win. All right. Thank you very much. Jennifer.
I think it's time for me to go to my flight. Well, clearly there's a lot of activity on the federal level, and I will tell you that from the state perspective, it's a lot more nerdy, and there is a lot more movement when it comes to legislative activity. As one of your lobbyists for the last, I don't want to talk about it, probably 15 years. I can tell you that the federal government is definitely a chaos location. So is your state legislature to a degree. It's obviously a foregone conclusion. We will continue to have a supermajority in the state of California of Democrats, which is why we often say it's not a blue problem or a red problem, but a purple solution. Realtors are that solution. And with that, generally speaking, you are one of the greatest advocates within the state capitol. People are afraid. They want to use your resources, and the grassroots activity that you all amass is second to none. As we continue to build that process and change with technology, and have more obviously calls to actions, red alerts, and activities, your involvement in the political process with your local electeds, with your state electeds, as well as with your congressional candidates also makes a huge difference in our ability to get things done. Without you, we can't be successful. CAR, unlike a lot of other organizations, carries a number of pieces of legislations that are identified by your board of directors as priorities for the organization. Sponsor bills are the highest priority for the organization. We put the majority of our resources into. This year, we're being a little bit careful. We are expecting a lot of defense. It's kind of weird for an election year to expect a lot of defense. Usually that happens in the first year of a legislative session. This time, we have a wholly different legislative look. I'm not sure how many of you have paid a lot of attention to term limits, but we used to call the legislators in the last cycle the 12ers. They were all elected in 2012 as term limits were altered to allow 12-year terms for both the Senate and the Assembly. You can serve in a mix of both houses, but you can serve all of them in one house or the other to gain expertise. With that, it's important to point out, we're now seeing a massive changeover. This year and last year, we got about 40 new legislators within the state legislature. Unlike Matt, who's got 535, I'll take it, it's fine. Individuals that NAR lobbies, of which obviously we have the congressional delegation, which is the highest priority to us, which is well over 50 members. For the state legislative staff, we have 120 members in the state legislature. There's 80 in the Assembly, 40 in the Senate. 20 of those in the Senate are up every other cycle. So they have 4-year terms in the Senate. We also do regulatory lobbying as well. And your lobbyists internally, we are all nerds, every last one of us. Sometimes we get a little into the details and the weeds. So if I get too far, let me know. For this year, we are sponsoring AB 2592, which was introduced last week. What this tries to do is to improve the water and sewer connection planning that happens with some of our single family homes. Specifically, one of my main priorities is finding supply. Supply means sides, sides means sales. And so in this instance, we are taking the Starter Home Revitalization Act that was put into law last year to expedite the approval of 10-unit or 10 home subdivisions. So these are small lot multifamily sites, generally going to be condos or high density, small backyard type developments. Hopefully, specifically the kinds of housing that people want to buy in the area and that you can generate with more sides. One of the issues that we run into though is developers are not always the best at planning ahead. So they go get their entitlements and then it's first come, first serve for water and sewer connection planning. The problem is there's a lot of competing activities that are out in the market right now. And as we continue to conserve water, we have more capacity in housing. However, those resources are taken over to things like marijuana cultivation. We only use about 20% of the water for housing in the state of California. 80% is used for other uses. What this bill does is it says that local governments need to align their planning for water and sewer with their housing element to ensure that we have water and sewer available for these projects so that we can get them actually by right and streamlined. AB 2717 Alvarez, I'm not sure what kind of planning has happened within this local area specifically, but a trend we have seen is a dramatic change in the way we plan housing in the state of California. Some areas only plan for all rental housing. Some areas plan for only home ownership housing. And it used to be when we saw single family home permitting, we assumed for the entirety of my career that those were single family homes available for owner occupancy. The landscape has changed a lot within the last 10 years. That is no longer the case. Assuming that single family homes are intended for owner occupants is a false sense of security or assumption as to what's happening in local planning. So in order to bridge that gap and recognizing the changing landscape where real estate investment trusts and others are gaining a higher rate of return on their investments, which are usually the entry-level moderate income housing that they buy in bulk, generally speaking. Alvarez is seeking to be able to give us the data we need to understand when an occupancy permit is issued for a new unit, what's the developer intending to sell it as? Is it going into a portfolio as multifamily? Is it going into a portfolio and being used as rental, but it's a condo with individual parcel numbers? Is it a single family home? Is it going for the most competitive bids for potential owner occupancy or investment, or are they solely intending to sell it in bulk to rental housing? These are the hard questions that we have to have the answers to before we can figure out what we need to do next to bridge the gap of affordability. I'm preaching to the choir, right? We're looking at a median housing price right now, projected $860,000 by the end of the year. I remember for the majority of my career, we had seen median housing prices in California between 400, 450 was monumental during the peak before the Great Recession. Everybody said, we're never going to get back here again. The median price of housing at 450 is unsustainable. Here we are, 13 years later, we've doubled that. The question is why? We don't know. And in order to be able to pinpoint why and what we need in the supply space to satisfy demand, we need better data. So we're going to try to help get you that data as directed by our board of directors. A measure that is likely to be even more near and dear to your hearts because we all really enjoy the practice of real estate specifically because that's where we make the most of our money. The board of directors has decided that we're going to sponsor legislation to codify the practice of using a buyer broker agreement. The buyer broker agreement currently is offered to realtors as an option within your REBS forms and your standard forms. A lot of agents use them. However, given the changing landscape of how we provide services to our clients, it's necessary that at the time either a contract is executed with a buyer for purchase or is practical or necessary and decided through negotiation between the agent and the buyer, there will be a buyer broker agreement requirement placed into statute. That requirement is going to be written similar to how our agency statute is written with respect to your representation for sellers, which is required at the same time. Essentially, we're going to mirror that process and then continue to offer the forms. What this means is anyone that's a real estate licensee, because we all know all realtors are real estate licensees, but not all real estate licensees are realtors. This levels the playing field and makes everybody play by the same rules of the game. Thank your board of directors. We haven't gotten it through yet. But that is one of our highest priorities. I'll go through the state budget update. I'm sure no one's surprised. The state's out of money. Not totally, but kind of. Unlike the federal government, who either has to print money, borrow money, or raise the cap on what their budgeting scenario is, California doesn't really work that way. We have deficits that we have to actually factor in for. The legislative analyst office is the one that does the analysis. Last year, we had almost $100 billion surplus. Oops, we spent it. And now we have a deficit. It was projected to be $68 billion at the end of last legislative year. So during the fall of 23. Now we're looking at the governor released his January budget, solving for a $31 billion deficit with borrowing and state off program opportunities. In the end, it's looking a little different. Yesterday or the day before, we're now at a $71 billion deficit. And so there is likely going to be significant changes as we move into the May revise. But with that said, there's a couple of important updates that I'd like to talk to you about real quick. California Dream for All. I think most of you have heard about this program. We've been working on it for about 3 years. Phase 2 is getting ready to roll out. The registration process for gaining access to the program will not open until April 2024. I spent the majority of this winter negotiating out terms with Cal HFA. They did things a little bit backwards this time. Usually I'm used to an agency putting out a request for stakeholders, having a discussion, and then adopting regs. We decided to do these ones backwards. Cal HFA adopted the regs, then held stakeholder meetings, then had to revise the regs. So we spent from about mid-November until the first part of January in daily conversations with them. One of the most significant changes you need to be aware of is they're no longer using the definition of first-time homebuyer. At one point, they suggested changing first-time homebuyer to mean something different than what we all understand it to mean under the GSE guidelines. That would have put the state in conflict. Anyone obtaining loans with Cal HFA may have not been able to have their loan repackaged and sold, creating room within our state agency's lending agency. They have now created a new definition of first generation buyer, which is actually being looked at nationally. The initial proposal was that they were going to prohibit anyone that had owned a home anywhere in the United States, whether by inheritance or otherwise, from being considered as a first generation home buyer. And if your parent had owned a home within the last 10 years, they had also applied it generally to both buyers. Now we're looking at an amendment that changed the definition to say a first generation buyer per CAR's negotiations means someone that hasn't owned a house in 7 years, similar to the bankruptcy proceedings. One of our greatest concerns was the exclusion of underserved communities that faced foreclosure during the Great Recession. We wanted to make sure that we were not eliminating their opportunity to gain access to these funds. And we were also very, very concerned about their parents' ability to gain funds or their children being eliminated because they had bought houses during the Great Recession that they had lost. We have resolved for both of those issues. Now it's that you haven't owned a home within 7 years and your parent does not currently own a home or did not own one upon death. Those are the two big changes. The other big change is the fact that you can have a first-time home buyer as the other co-buyers in the situation, but one of the individuals that's on the application must meet the first generation requirement. Like last time, you're required to complete a home buyer education course. The eligibility has been reduced from 150% of the AMI to 120%. This is significant, but however, don't be scared. I'm going to give you access to a link that'll show you what kind of flexibility you're still looking at. Because when we say 120%, that's still a family factor of 8. It's much higher than what that 120 looks like. The shared equity last time did not have a cap. We have a cap now of 150% or 20%. You cannot have more than 5% down from another resource. Apparently there was some issues where individuals were combining Dream for All with additional grants and resources that they were receiving, and their down payments were much more significant. So now if you have an excess of that 5%, you'll be eliminated from the voucher pool. This is the look at the page because the link is going live in April. It's important for you to get your clients set up and qualified now. The scan that is up there will take you to Cal HFA's page where that registration voucher button is. You can see it just above Matt's head where the button says it's going to be live in April. And on there is additional program highlights as well as the AMI chart specific to this program. Another thing that's important, and the reason this is tied behind the budget, is the fact simply that we didn't get our pocket picked this year. Last year, I spent the majority of 2023 fighting to get back $250 million that were swept from the program funds to fill last year's budget issues for other programs. This year, the governor has left it alone, didn't sweep the funds. We're elated the program is going to roll out before the May revise, because quite frankly, by May revise, they might have swept it. But by the time we get to May revise, I fully anticipate the program to be exhausted. Another important update that you should be aware of, DRE is proposing a fee increase. They haven't had one since 1997. It's been a minute. They've also uncovered in the last 2 years, which is a cause of concern, that they have a significant budget deficit. They're not able to maintain staffing for licensing, exams, or services to our members on the front lines and their call centers. We're not 100% sure how that snuck through Department of Finance that they were running in a deficit, but that has been recently uncovered, giving us pause, which is okay. Just by way of example, right now, a salesperson's initial cost for your license and fee is on average, because we have a 4-year license. So you take the total fee, you divide it by 4. And I should tell you, we are probably one of the, we are the only licensing group with a 4-year license. Everybody else has 2 and 3 years. So you have a longer span between to do your continuing education. Annually right now, it's $76-ish to get your initial. When you're talking about the exam and the license fee, and your renewal is $61.25. For the broker, it's about $97, and for their renewal, it's about $75 if you average it out over 4 years. The proposed increase it looks extremely significant, but they factored for the consumer price index since 1997 to today to factor this first step of increase. So what you're looking at is an increase to the salesperson's initial 4-year license being an average ranged over to be about $112 per year and $87 per year on your renewal. The broker would be $150 for your initial and $112 on renewal. So generally speaking, you're looking at, I don't know, a $20 to $30 increase annually to what the fee is. All in all, not the worst thing you could get, especially in a budget deficit. However, I should also tell you DRE is proposing another range. So right now, the way the law works is the DRE was able to take your fees to the maximum amount currently allowed under statute many, many years ago. But we put poison pill language into the statute to say, if the governor or the legislature comes and picks the pocket of the agency, your fees roll down to the statutory minimum. That poison pill is remaining, so that will still happen. The question is, which statutory minimum are we going to go to? And then we have to negotiate this out with DRE. Is it going to be our previous statutory minimum or the new statutory minimum that they're proposing? Additionally, the other concern that we have is oversight, because they are looking at raising the fees up to the next cap by regulation. So we're going to have to look at the different negotiation opportunities that we have to discuss this with DRE. We're still real early in the process. We are likely to have a lot of dialogue and discussion. Budget subcommittee hearings start next week. So we are already hot and heavy into the legislative cycle. There's tons of bills of others. Last week was bill introduction, and we are still sorting through all the problem children. There's one bill that's been introduced by Assemblymember Bennett, which seeks to alter the Cartwright Act, which has to do with anti-competition statutes that you're going to want to keep an ear out for this year. We're in opposition to that measure, along with a variety of other people. That bill number is 2230. Additionally, there's going to be bills that seek to create a tenants' rights agency. I'm not sure that that's going to go very far, but it doesn't change the fact that there is a lot of desire within the state of California to help out tenants. There are commercial rent control bills that have been introduced. There are bills to limit REIT expansion of their holdings in order to reduce competition. There is one bill that prohibits real estate investment trusts from buying property in California, period. There's another one that punishes them with a fine of $100,000 plus return of the property to the market. It'll be really interesting to see what this year holds, what happens, and what the decisions are that are made by your board of directors. I guarantee it's going to be really exciting in the May meetings. We are going to have a lot of policy questions, because there's a lot of policy questions coming up in these bills that are being introduced that are definitely going to create a new way of seeing the landscape of the world as we look at policy. However, in deference to time, I want to leave an opportunity, because I'm pretty sure I'm over, for you to ask any questions of myself or Matt related to what we do for the organization, or maybe what you've seen in the news.
Come on up, Tate. Please ask your question in the microphone. You two are.
So I make some notes, and thank you so much for your overview and also the update about the political state for the local level. Coming up, you mentioned about the deficit budget. On behalf of the board, on the region, local level, is there anything we can do for the top 5 for the action plans? In terms of your deficit budget, so like for realtors, because when we talk to the state, our SM members, like the chief of staff, they said that what else the home ownership we can do to promote or advocate about. We understand that people cannot afford home. Medium home price, you're talking about 850,000 or 900,000 in San Gabriel Valley. So my question is there anything policy-wise, Senate or futures, we have a Sacramento legislative day. So it's something that we can help to advocate, to talk to our state and level, Senate level.
100%. So when it comes to legislative day, I can't really predict what the priorities are going to be that we're going to carry across the street to the legislature. There are quite a few candidates that we've seen introduced that may very well be those bills. A lot happens between now and our meetings at the end of April. Policy committees start here within the next week. So we'll see a lot of movement there. But what I would say is it's really important that you start advocacy about the November general election ballot. The board of directors has authorized an expenditure to oppose ACA 1, which seeks to increase the cost of housing to pay for corporate owned rental housing specifically. So as we're looking at the problem of diminishing returns, that is one of the issues, that they're always looking for money for subsidized rental housing. However, the amount of money that we receive for down payment assistance programs, which really helps families over corporations, has not been something that we've seen prior to Dream for All since '76. The last time we received an infusion of money from the general fund for down payment assistance, that amount I think was $300 million then, which would equate to $3 billion today had we continued to have that allocation. Subsidized housing receives $7 to $11 billion. That does include both rental housing as well as homelessness and transitional housing that has wraparound service and programs. Not saying that those programs aren't important, but what I am saying is with ACA 1, it leverages all infrastructure and development costs for a local bonding authority and reduces the vote threshold for easier passage. People don't often understand a bond is a tax. It's just a tax by a different word. And so it shows up on your property tax bill at the end of the year. And that amount gets impounded and exponentially reduces your opportunity to be able to afford housing. In my local community, we've got 3 bonds coming up, which is a total cost, if all of them are passed, each one has $30 per 100,000. And there's 4 of them with that exact same numeric. The same will happen with ACA 5 if we reduce to the 55% vote threshold. The weird thing is the AG drafted the ballot measure to look like it's an increase to the vote threshold, but it's really a decrease. So it was 2/3 and they're trying to reduce it to 55%. It is not 50% going up to 55%. The other thing that's problematic is special districts. I don't know how many you have in the area or in the valley. I know that for new construction, they are a regular activity for funding your infrastructure projects. Just so we are all clear, Prop 13 collects about $80 billion annually in revenue for the state of California. Special districts that did not really exist before the 90s collect like $82 billion. So we're seeing a tipping point where everyone talks about Prop 13 reducing local government services, but we now have special districts that have filled the gap and now balanced it back out to where we're no longer seeing the same certainty in your base value property taxes that you once had under a Prop 13 community. As developers have figured out that they can bond against your future tax proceeds by the future owners, which means the builders no longer have to pay for infrastructure. So that's one of the questions going forward. And my suggestion is let your clients know what the detriment is. Let your legislators know that their support for placing that measure on the ballot was problematic and you'd like to see it pulled off. I think that is probably the single priority at this point. ACA 13, ironically enough, is a very complicated measure, but it also seeks to open the door to eliminating Prop 13 in the end. So that bill was also placed in the last end of session on the ballot for November, and we would like to see that removed as well. It's unclear what the future holds. We have until June to either get those measures off the ballot, place a competing measure on the ballot, or simply start rolling up the phones and get y'all working. Apparently, I don't have good news.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the update. I have 2 daughters and they graduate from college, start working. So it's one night in the dinner table, they asked me, Dad, for our income right now, and when can we offer to buy a house? So basically, I said, I don't know. So my question is, what policies the government is implementing or will implement to help these younger generations?
I wish I had a crystal ball to be able to tell you what they're gonna do next. Maybe then I could stop some really crazy stuff. I think one of the biggest complications that we've had is everybody wants to talk about renting and tenants. We do talk about generational wealth. The legislature talks about it all the time. But unfortunately, when the rubber meets the road and we're advocating for policies to further home ownership and the opportunity for individuals to make offers on what we call NOAH housing, naturally occurring affordable market rate housing, essentially your smaller 700, 1,200 square foot homes on smaller lots, those seem to still be going into portfolios. It also goes into the affordable housing community as well. One of the things that we're seeking to do is eliminate the acquisition of 1 to 4 housing from a lot of the government programs, because it seems wrong to have your daughters have to compete against a company that's being provided loans and guarantees for single-family homes at a much cheaper rate where they can offer cash, as opposed to a family that wants to occupy and make that home their own. And so that's something that we're advocating for and will continue to advocate for going forward.
Okay, thank you.
On behalf of the West San Gabriel Valley Realtors, I would like to thank our guest speakers for the very informative presentation. Please accept our small token of appreciation. We want to keep you nice and dry in this raining season. If it's all right, if I could take a picture with you all. And then with it, just in case you want to buy some coffee, we also have some gift certificates. Thank you everyone for joining our meeting today. Have a wonderful day. This meeting is now adjourned.